it wasn't that long ago that the first week of the month was a lighter week for the Caped Crusader. As you can see, not anymore. Technically, it's probably, based on my normal standards, only a 4-issue week. But there are a couple bonus titles that I picked up this week that are really more Batman adjacent in my opinion, but I am getting them. So I'll show those to you guys first. We've got Monkey King. This is issue 4. I think this is the conclusion of the storyline. Not sure if this is going to be continuing or what, but excited to see how the storyline wraps up. I've really enjoyed Monkey Prince so far. Even though it's not a Batman title, it's set in Gotham City. He goes to the high school that Damian Wayne goes to, and the villain is the Penguin. So very Bat-centric title. Glad I hopped on board and checked this out week to week because it's been a lot of fun to read this one. The other sort of Batman-adjacent title I picked up this week is Flashpoint Beyond. This is issue 1 of 6. Now, as you can see, we do have Thomas Wayne on the cover, so it is also basically a Batman title, but it's also technically, you know, a big DC crossover event at the same time. But I love the original Flashpoint. I loved what they've done with Thomas Wayne over the years and kind of integrating him into the regular DC universe. Haven't read Infinite Frontier yet, but I did read Flashpoint Beyond Zero. It was honestly a disappointment for me, so curious to see if they can save it with issue 1. If this doesn't really hook me, I'll probably actually end up dropping this title, but we'll see. I was on the fence even picking up issue 1, to be honest. Okay, and then on to the main Batman titles. We have one title that takes place in the past, 2 titles that are in the here and now, and 1 title that takes place in the far-flung future. So let's go through these chronologically. The title taking place in the past is Batman Killing Time. This is a miniseries by Tom King, telling an early story in which Catwoman and the Riddler double-cross the Penguin and steal a precious jewel, and everyone is out to get everyone else, and Batman's kind of caught in the middle of it. This story's had a ton of like time jumps and bouncing back and forth and all over the place. Very Tom King-centric. The first 2 issues of this for me were intriguing, but a little bit lackluster in the sense that it was so caught up in being convoluted that I felt like we weren't really getting anywhere. Hopefully issue 3 really picks up the pace. Next up, we have Joshua Williamson's penultimate issue on Batman with issue 123. Chip Zdarsky takes over with 125, I believe. Issue 124, I think, is still written by Joshua Williamson, and they're bringing back Abyss for one more story, so that'll be interesting for sure. In the meantime, we've got the continuation of Shadow War, probably my favorite DC crossover that I've read in a while, so excited to see how things continue in this title this week. Alright, next up is another channel favorite. As I'm thinking about it, I think this actually would have taken place before Batman 123, so I guess this should have come first, but whatever. Task Force Z issue number 7. Issue 6 was my favorite issue of this title so far. It answered a lot of questions, pulled a lot of various plot threads together, and can't wait to see what happens in issue 7 of this. Matthew Rosenberg and Eddie Barrows make a great team for this book. It's funny, it's action-packed, and it's the ultimate why does this book even exist, and yet why can't I stop reading it? Because it's just a great, fun page-turner. Can't wait to get into this one this month. Alright, and then that just leaves the title in the far-flung future of Batman Beyond. We have issue 2 of Batman Beyond Neo Year. Issue 1, kind of off to a soft start. It didn't feel like it really lived up to the expectation set in Batman Urban Legends when they introduced the idea of this living Gotham AI that's sort of taking over the city. So I'm hoping that with issue 2 we kind of get back around to that and explore that concept a little bit more. But we'll just have to wait and see. Those are the books I'm going to be reading for you guys today. I'm going to dig in and let you guys know what happened this week in Batman. Stay tuned. Alright, so I've had the chance to read through my books, and I've organized them from least favorite to most favorite. Once again, DC pretty much hitting it out of the park this week. There was only one title I would say I didn't care for, but it was still actually pretty intriguing. I'm actually not entirely sure how I felt about it. And then the rest of them were all like very solid, multiples of which probably could have been pick of the week. So you'll see some titles kind of low on the list, but only one title I would say is probably skippable. Everything else is pretty much a pickup for me this week, so that's exciting. Kicking things off, bottom of the list is going to go to Flashpoint Beyond. So I didn't like issue 0. The thing that held this issue back the most for me was probably the art. I really don't like, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name Zermanico, I think. But the art just doesn't do anything for me whatsoever. I guess I'm just used to these big events having some kind of like superstar on it, like a Jim Lee, an Andy Kubert, just something a little extra special. And this feels just a little pedestrian. One of the things I liked about issue 0 was Eduardo Risso's art. I think he does a great Batman and is kind of cool alternate programming for a big event like this. And so I was hoping he would be on more of it than just the 0 issue, but I had a feeling that was the only one he would end up being in. As far as the actual plot, we have the death of another superhero in this. I don't want to spoil who it is, but at the end of the last issue, we had the death of the Flashpoint version of the Flash. Here we get the death of another superhero, and it seems like, spoiler alert, the regular Batman is actually the one that's kind of behind everything and messing with reality and all this stuff. I'm getting exhausted just talking about it, to be honest with you. Alright, so the title I have second from the bottom, which I really wanted to reorganize it, but I couldn't because there were just other better books out there. But Batman Beyond Neo Year issue 2, I have to say, was a huge improvement for me over issue 1. The thing holding this book back still is really the fact that this should have been issue 1, or even issue 0. This felt like kind of like a broad survey of kind of the state of things right now. We focused a lot on this AI. We spent a good amount of time with Terry McGinnis having to contend with the fact that he has to go quote-unquote offline, which was great. That was probably my biggest complaint with issue 1, is it didn't seem like the status quo really changed all that much. But here he's forced to really change things up quite a bit. I also find myself, for the most part, really enjoying the art in this. It's not necessarily something, that you need to write home about, but I feel like it does a pretty good job of balancing a more modern, typical comic book style with that Bruce Timm heritage that, is integral to something like a Batman Beyond. There's a great splash page in here where Terry McGinnis goes to Joker Town and he sees all the various Jokers, and I just had a ton of fun looking at this and taking it all in. Otherwise, like I said, the only thing holding this book up is you sort of have a gallery of villains that he kind of bounces back and forth from, and it's just a little bit directionless. He clearly has a strategy in which he's going to have to ally himself with some of the criminal underworld in order to beat out this AI, but he hasn't really gotten anywhere in that process. So if this had been a 0 issue, I would say this would be a knock out of the park issue. But as an issue 2, it just feels a little bit weird. Next up, we had another page turner, actually, which was Batman 123. Last month, I talked about this book and how I really enjoyed Howard Porter's artwork in this. And once again, it did not disappoint. If you didn't like it last time around, I don't know that this is the book that's going to sell you on it. There's something about late era Howard Porter and his angular style that I think really fits Batman versus ninjas really well. And that's where this book really shines, is when Batman is, taking on the League of Assassins. It probably shines less so when he's, at Blackgate or Arkham Asylum or wherever he is, interrogating random convict number 5. As far as the story goes in this, we find out that Ghostmaker is running Batman Inc., and we are promised to find out why that is in the Batman Annual for 2022, which is coming out at the end of the month. I think that that's fine, although it's one of those things where, the Batman having too many characters thing comes into play, because I feel like there's a lot of other interesting people that could have taken that role. And Ghostmaker is such a new character that I'm just still questioning why that character needs to exist at all. But that's almost a separate complaint because he does exist, so they gotta do something with him, I suppose. And then the majority of the book focuses on Batman and Damian Wayne teaming up to get to the bottom of who exactly it is that killed Ra's al Ghul. Deathstroke continues to be on the run from the League of Assassins, who believe that he is the one that killed them. And I have to say, this crossover has been really good at juggling just enough storylines. There's not too much going on in here as it is in Fear State, and all the storylines actually tie into what the crossover is about, whereas something like Fear State, it felt like they were setting up storylines for things like Batgirls as opposed to focusing on the Scarecrow and what was going on in the here and now. So even though we're following a lot of different stories in Shadow War, it feels way more cohesive than a lot of other stuff I've been complaining about over the course of Infinite Frontier, basically, is when DC's really struggled with multitasking, I feel like. Now, there is something that happens at the very end of this that certainly keeps the page turning going on. Oh, and by the way, here's all the ninjas I was talking about that I really enjoy Howard Porter's illustrations of. But it was also something that was very disappointing to me. I don't want to spoil it here. If you haven't read it, I think it's going to be, a pretty big moment for you. But it definitely undercuts some of the things that made me excited about what happened earlier in this story arc. And so as far as the context of this story alone, it's got me pumped up to see what's going to happen next. But I'm also thinking 3 steps ahead, and some of the things that I was excited about them setting up in prior issues are now probably not going to happen. But again, I have theories, but I can't say them without telling you how it ends, so I'm not going to talk about it here. The other thing that held this book back a little bit would be the backup story. There was nothing wrong with it. It was a 2-part story where Batman and Deathstroke have this altercation from early in his career. He's hopped up on Joker serum, and we bring Joker into this, and it's just kind of a wrap up to what for me was a completely pointless backup story. But that said, if you're into Shadow War, I think this title is going to definitely satisfy you. And as I already said, I just can't wait to see what happens next. Next up is a book that's actually surprisingly high on my list. I saved this one for last or second to last when I was reading this week, because I honestly wasn't looking forward to it, which is probably not a good place to be in. But the first 2 issues, again, they were fine. They just didn't blow me out of the water. But Batman Killing Time 3 of 6, I'll tell you what, this was a fun read. So they introduced this character, The Help, who Penguin hires to get revenge on Catwoman and the Riddler and anyone else involved in this whole heist that left the Penguin in traction. Understandable enough, I can't blame the Penguin for being a little upset about that. And the place where this book really shined was with that character, because he's an old man that has seen every other assassin and worked with every other assassin over the course of the years. And so Batman goes to face off with him, and he's like, oh, you're doing Descartes now. Oh, you worked with Ra's al Ghul. Well, let me tell you, this is what doesn't work about Ra's al Ghul. Wildcat is mentioned. You get a reference to David Kane. Basically, Batman gets his butt kicked, and it really was pretty exciting. The other thing going on in this is Catwoman and the Riddler, who ultimately end up stealing the Batmobile in order to make their getaway, which is just kind of a fun moment. And so just ultimately a lot of great developments in Batman Killing Time. A lot of fun to read, even though it doesn't necessarily answer a lot of the burning questions I've had. It definitely has me excited for the final half of the story. The only complaint I have about this book at this point really is just the time jumps, bouncing back and forth. It's just a really convoluted way to keep your story exciting. To me, it's a crutch. It's not really elevating the storytelling. It's just trying to create a puzzle box for the reader by just waving, its hands in your face so you can't actually see what's really going on. For me, Tom King's record is dubious enough that it's the Damon Lindelof thing. Does he really have an awesome plan, or are you just a gullible cat that Tom King has bouncing off the walls because he's shining a laser pointer all over the place? I genuinely don't know yet, so we'll just have to wait and see. Now comes the part where I really have to put my money where my mouth is, because either of these 2 last books could be pick of the week. I really waffled back and forth on this over and over, but I'm gonna have to go with penultimate book being Task Force Z number 7. I think the thing you're gonna notice about both of these last books I'm talking about is they both put a smile on my face. Sometimes it doesn't have to be a complicated, universe-ending, universe-altering event for me to have a good time. As a matter of fact, I'm going to get way more enjoyment out of something like this than I am something like Flashpoint at this point, because DC has done these events to death. They just killed the Justice League. We've got multiple events playing out all on top of each other, and it's just getting to be noise at this point. Whereas you can just sit down and read a fun concept, which in this case is Jason Todd leading a bunch of undead Batman supervillains, as a new Suicide Squad-esque super team, all employed by Two-Face, and just have a great time with it. Now you'll notice as I'm flipping through this, Eddie Barrows is not actually on art this time around. It has his name on the cover, so I was a little bit confused at first. He might have done a panel here and there, but for the most part, we have a fill-in artist throughout the course of this book. Ultimately, I didn't have a problem with it because it really wasn't distracting to me. It does feel like a lesser Eddie Barrows-esque style, but it was still effective. It didn't take me out of the experience, which is great. And supporting it is just the fantastic writing by Matthew Rosenberg that continues to surprise and, like I said, bring a smile to my face. There are multiple times in this book when I laughed out loud. There's a part in this at the beginning where Jason Todd is having a dream that's amalgamating a whole bunch of different elements from Jason Todd's history. And you see Jason Todd in his old Robin costume that, like, barely fits, which was a really funny touch that I think that the artist did a great job rendering, despite the fact that, you know, he's not Eddie Barrows. He got the brief. Matthew Rosenberg focused a lot on developing Jason Todd and Two-Face's relationship in this, which I think was a smart move. I'm glad that that big twist at the end of issue, like, 4, in which Two-Face was involved in all of this, wasn't just like a one-off that kind of disappeared when the band kind of fell apart. Instead, they've continued to really support that narrative. Now Jason Todd is getting, you know, more and more into the thick of things. And at the end of the book, he finds himself in a position where he's going to have to now, you know, turn his back on Batman, who had originally sent him undercover to Task Force Z in order to steal more resin to save his team. So next issue certainly promises to bring us a great conflict between Batman and Jason Todd as the conflict of interest grows between these two characters. And I just can't wait to see issue 8. So that makes our book of the week Monkey Prince number 4, the conclusion of this initial limited series. At the end of this, they promise that the series is actually going to continue. It sounds like Monkey Prince is moving to Amnesty Bay, and we're going to have kind of another round of Monkey Prince. I don't know if it's coming next month or just at some point in the future, in which, you know, now he's going to be dealing with Aquaman and all the things that go along with that, which I think is going to be a lot of fun. I won't actually be picking that up in singles because I do only collect Batman and Batman-related singles. But I am looking forward to seeing what happens with it and reading that in a trade, because as a conclusion to the Monkey Prince storyline, this was just an absolute blast to read. Another book that just brought a smile to my face multiple times. You have Monkey Prince teaming up with Damian Wayne, creating an uneasy alliance between the two, and Monkey Prince slowly getting more and more clever with his powers. There's a great moment in here where he convinces Damian Wayne to throw a batarang at his chest in order to split him in two so that his legs can go off and do one thing and the top half of his body can go off and do another, which was just a great little moment. I don't know exactly why I love this book so much. It's just so creative and so much fun. And now that this book has made me familiar with Monkey Prince, I've actually started to see this character elsewhere. There's like a PlayStation 4 game actually that features Monkey Prince, because, you know, he's not a DC superhero. He is a Chinese folklore figure that is sort of superheroic, I guess. I don't know a lot about him, but I'm kind of curious to know more. You know, a lot of people I've talked to really like this book. And I think it's because it's an original character, it's creative, it's fun. It's also bringing awareness to this community in a great way that I think builds bridges. Monkey Prince was a great book, and I would recommend anybody go out and check this one out. It's just a fun read. All right, so that wraps up my coverage of what happened this week in Batman. Did you read any of these books? Let me know what you thought in the comments below. I'd love to have a greater discussion. Are you reading Monkey Prince? What do you think of it? Are you reading Flashpoint? What do you think of that? Be sure to like, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, all the stuff that people say. I will talk to you guys very soon, and I hope you guys have a great week in comics. Thanks for watching.